All right. Thank you all for joining us. We're very happy to be here to talk about cybersecurity risk as one of the pressing problems facing global governments. Couple of housekeeping tips before we get started. You are automatically placed on mute, although we want this to be interactive, so you'll notice at the very bottom of your screen you have a little Q&A button. Please enter your questions in the Q&A. We want to, again, make this interactive. We want to get your questions answered. The session is being recorded, and I will share in our chat a link to our on-demand webinar that you'll be able to watch and have your coworkers watch after this. And at the very end, we do have a short survey that will pop up, so we appreciate you taking that so that we can come up with new ideas to be able to present to you all. So today, we'll be talking about cybersecurity challenges. We're going to get into how ServiceNow can help. And then, driving customer success. How are we showing our customers finding success with the solutions that we're offering them? And then finally, a wrap up. I am very pleased to be joined by my two colleagues, Brian Myers. Brian, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Myers. I run the security or risk and security practice for Verizon. I'm sorry, Verizon. For ServiceNow Federal, and been doing it for about 4 years. I'm joined by Todd Huber. Todd's my solution consultant. Todd.
Thank you, Brian. Todd Huber here. Like Brian said, I am his solution consultant. Been with ServiceNow just about 3.5 years now. And prior to this, I actually did RMF work as a practitioner with the government. As a contractor in a govy, I spent 11 years doing DIACAP and RMF. So I'm very familiar with the use case, and I'm looking forward to our session this afternoon.
And Todd is going to bring it to life for us with a live demo. So make sure you stick around to see the live demo. So, we did some research and in a paper that we recently published, there's 4 pressing problems that we really see facing global government. So this isn't just the North American US government, but it's also the EMEA government, European Union. This is very common. And you'll find that this isn't honestly even just relegated to governments. These problems also touch on private business. The first one is cyber threats, and we're going to be talking a lot more about that today. The second one, and we'll have a future webinar on this, is around climate change and how that is not only impacting the government's ability to help organizations, private organizations, moderate their use of carbon emissions, but it also touches on things like how do you report and manage food production when there's climate issues? How are you dealing with threats to critical infrastructure from the climate? There are actually a myriad challenges that the government is trying to address around climate change. Supply chain disruption. This is something that I think we all really lived through during the pandemic. But, we can remember back getting plastic bottles or getting the necessary equipment to be able to administer the vaccinations for COVID. Supply chain issues can be a massive public health and security threat. And then finally, artificial intelligence. This is the topic of the year, I think, honestly. And artificial intelligence really touches the government in a couple of different ways. It's the government's use of artificial intelligence and how do you put the guardrails around AI and the use of AI. And then also, especially during an election year, how do you deal with disinformation that is being created using AI? So a couple of challenges there, and we'll have webinars coming up over the next couple of months to address each of these. So hopefully you'll tune in and listen to the rest of the webinar series. But right now, we're going to talk a little bit about combating cyber threats. And in our paper, we discuss a couple of different areas of threat here. One of them being attacks on critical infrastructure, and that's really what we see as being the largest threat. There's a couple of different ways that people organizations and governments are addressing this. The EU has got NIS2, which is mandating the use of and the ability to report on critical infrastructure. And then in the United States, we have a variety of regulations. One of them focused on energy and utilities, which is NERC, SIP. And the other one is NIST 853, and the other NIST standards, honestly. The second area that we look at from cyber threats is attacks on physical assets. So if you think about undersea cables, the internet, and the connectivity the internet provides from a government perspective is critical. Any sort of disruption to the internet, to the undersea cables, is going to be a significant threat to our ability to function as a nation, and also to our potentially national security. And then finally, concerns over the use of internal technology sourced from adversarial countries. And you see this in some of the Biden mandates about sourcing different components from different countries. You see it from new regulations that are being discussed around electric vehicles and the ability to purchase those from different countries. So a lot of a discussion and concern about that. But today, we're going to focus on attacks on our critical infrastructure. And in particular, we're going to focus on NIST 853. And I know, Brian and Todd, you gentlemen have a lot of discussions about this. So I want to turn it over, Brian, to you to tell us a little bit about what NIST 853 is, or NIST standards in general, and also, get into some of the ways that ServiceNow can actually help.
Thanks, Teresa. Yeah, absolutely. So this is the NIST 837 that brings in 853, 839, 800, 160, 800, 118 into that big framework that is the NIST risk management framework. And there are 7 steps to that, right? Starting with prepare and then going out to categorize all the way around that circle to monitoring controls. And that's really what Todd's going to show you later in the presentation. But the idea behind this is to merge the compliance with the risk. As when Todd was doing this in the federal space, a lot of times you could choose. You can be secure or you can be compliant, but you don't have enough manpower to do both. The automation of ServiceNow allows us to really work towards getting compliance and security in the same ballpark and drive in that direction. And wanted to show you kind of how. First, we know that people are doing this today, right? They are looking inside of that circle there. They've got everybody working, but they're working on different platforms. They're working on different pieces of data. Things are getting lost and changed and not followed correctly. And there's no automation. So what ServiceNow does is really try to drive those manual processes into a really automated capability that we call continuous authorization and monitoring, or CAM. You'll hear Todd refer to it in either way. But it's everything, again, around that life cycle of collecting evidence, creating the documents, monitoring the controls and assessing risk, tracking POAMs, and then making those consolidated risk reports and putting everyone on that same platform, so everyone has the view that's important to them, and they can drive forward with the capabilities with the answers that they need, so that they can again be both compliant and secure at the same time. So where do we sit inside of ServiceNow? ServiceNow is, that flexible platform. We're in it. We've got that intuitive UX that you'll see today. A single data model. So we can use information from across the ServiceNow platform to do this NIST RMF work. Because we're in that single architecture and seamless integration, we are really driving towards making you more successful in meeting your missions, in doing all of those things across the top that are important to any organization, but it's specifically in the federal space. To drive towards those. And we use a lot of other pre-built workflows, whether they're customer workflows, employee workflows, finance and supply, or our tech workflows, to really drive forward into the digitization of government. To that, we connect any system that is available, that the agency has available, so that we can pull that information in, not to become the system of record, but to be the system of action for those workflows. We have the impact team that provides insights and services so that they can move things forward. Our risk and compliance, audit management, and resiliency, that's really what we're going to be talking about today. It kind of sits on top of all of this capability. And because there's risk in all of those areas, there's compliance requirements, there's resiliency requirements, and NIST requires that of everyone. In our space, in the federal space, we put our customers into the FedRAMP High GCC Government Community Cloud. We've got a DoD IL5 capability as well for our DoD customers. But we offer all of this capability in a very secure environment. And so CAM is really that continuous authorization and monitoring sits on top of a couple of things. So our IRM provides the basis of that. And the first part of integrated risk management is the governance, risk, and compliance piece. So policy and compliance, risk, and audit management together form that GRC capability that Gartner has found we're in the leading quadrant for. Forrester has found we're leading in. To that, we add third-party risk management as a separate capability, data privacy risk management, business continuity risk management, all in the goal of getting to operational resilience. So the ability to look past what you have today, to look past that security and compliance, and really move towards operational resilience. Continuous authorization and monitoring is a store application in our parlance. So it sits in our store. It's available to IRM professional users, but it is a capability that uses a lot of what we have in policy, risk, and audit. Todd will show you that in a few seconds as I get through this. Really what we're doing is sitting on top of that highly capable platform with that GRC overlay, putting a continuous authorization and monitoring capability in to do the 7 steps across the NIST RMF. If there, for some reason, you're using a tool, a GOTS product in the federal space, CSAM is a government provided tool that doesn't have a good API, we can offer RPAs to push that information back and forth in there. But we're pulling information, as I mentioned before, out of IT service management, operations management, asset management, SPM, SecOps, DevOps, wherever that information is in our platform, we're pulling it so that it can be easier to do those compliance jobs to make your environment more secure. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Todd so he can drive forward and show you things like our capabilities in dashboards and reporting. Todd?
Thank you, Brian.
Please make sure you use the Q&A feature down below. We want to make sure you get your questions. Todd's going to be showing you some amazing stuff. If you have any thoughts or questions, comments, please go ahead and share them.
Yep, I'm going to try and keep my eye in the chat also, but if a question comes up, please feel free to ask. But we'll try and get to the questions at the end if anything comes up in the chat and I miss. So we'll get started out here, and we're going to start out with the authorization boundary. And once we talk about how we can create and maintain boundaries in CAM, then we'll shift over into an authorization package. We'll take that package through the entire RMF process, step 0 through step 6, so all 7 steps. We'll stop off at the assessment at step 4 to see how that can be completed. And then we will wrap up with generating ATO artifacts and continuous monitoring at the end. So starting out here with the boundary. I kind of look at this form in 3 different sections. The top third here contains the attributes that are specific to the authorization boundary. The middle section contains the diagrams that will go into the SSP once generated. And the bottom third contains the nuts and bolts of the boundary where the system elements can be found. It's important to note that this the interface that we're going to look at throughout the entire presentation is very configurable. And this is important, especially with authorization boundaries, because metrics, data calls, and reporting is a big part of RMF in the federal space. So you can add in additional fields here to capture data points that you would like to add into your reporting requirements. So onto the boundary itself down here in the system elements list. This is whatever the information system is comprised of, on-prem or cloud, physical, virtual, networking devices, servers, workstations, whatever applications, whatever the information system is, this is where it will be defined. We can populate this out two ways. Click new and add in system elements from the CMDB manually, or we can automate this process with boundary filters. I'm going to show one example of a boundary filter here, and this one is pretty simple, but you can get very complex with these, and you can use as many boundary filters as necessary to define your boundary. The way they work is the filter is basically a scheduled job that will add and remove system elements from the boundary, and for the filter to work, we just need to point it to the table where the data resides that we want to filter on. Once we select that table, in this case, we want to pull in all the Windows servers from the Windows Server table with a name that does not contain load. So when we select the table, the filter condition drop down here has the columns that are in the table that we selected. We can make the selection there and then build out the filter condition. If we want to use a subnet, for example, instead of using name, we would select IP address, and then we can, for the operator, we can use between, and then set the top and bottom ranges of the IP address subnet, and then you'll be able to pull in any system elements that are added to the CMDB and contain an IP address within that range. So the scheduled jobs run every 24 hours. If the filter picks up a system element in the CMDB that matches that criteria, if there is not all that system element's not already in the boundary, it will pull that system element into the boundary. If the system element is already in the boundary, the filter runs again and does not identify it, the filter will dynamically pull that system element out. And again, every 24 hours that happens. That's very beneficial for two reasons. One, we see that is compliance, because your documentation will be up to date with an accurate boundary. Two is security, because when we get all the way to the end and we talk about continuous monitoring, we will run continuous monitoring indicators against the system elements in the boundary to measure for compliance. So it's important that we have an accurate boundary list. The last important note here is that CAM does not do the work of populating out the CMDB. It's not doing discovery. It's not identifying systems on the network or pulling in data from another CMDB. It's just accessing the data that's in the ServiceNow CMDB that's been populated out through ServiceNow tools or integrations with third-party tools. Once we have the boundary established, we'll be able to create an authorization package. We already have one here, so we're going to transition over to the package that's in the prepare step. So it's the intention of NIST that the tasks that are performed during prepare can be performed during any step in the RMF process, hence the 0 designation. But one task that we will do up front and not again throughout the rest of the subsequent steps is selecting the version of 853 that we will use to apply controls into the package. We do provide the controls for Rev 4 and Rev 5 out of the box. And once we've made that selection, then we'll be able to further refine the roles and responsibilities here. And again, these are configurable interfaces. So if you would like to add in additional roles and responsibilities, you could definitely add in those columns into the table. The last thing we'll address during prepare is whether or not privacy data is present in the boundary. We have 4 questions here. This is the PTA that's defined by NIST. And if any of these privacy threshold analysis questions are answered yes, then CAM will designate the boundary as a privacy sensitive system, and it will generate a privacy impact assessment that we will need to assign to a respondent. We do provide a privacy impact assessment out of the box. However, we're aware that most of our customers have a PIA in place now that they would like to either replicate in the platform or achieve a desired state. That's easy to do with CAM because the PIAs, they are an assessment instance template that's comprised of these assessment instance questions. They're like questions in a question bank. You build them out ahead of time. You can apply weighting to them and design some functionality in there that you would get outside of a PDF. So you could have dependent type questions where if you answer a question a certain way, it'll open up additional questions. And you can really replicate what your existing PIA is or get you to that desired state. What it will look like from the end user's perspective, they'll get a notification in platform, text message, email, however you do that they need to respond to an assessment. When they open it up, this is what the out-of-the-box one looks like. They can provide the narratives for all the questions, either save and come back later or submit. Once the PIA has been submitted over, the ISSO or whoever is working the package will be able to use that to help tailor controls during the select step and then document controls during the implement step. So once we've wrapped up our tasks during prepare, which are assign the control set to the package, define the roles and responsibilities, and then address privacy, then we will be able to move on to the next step in the process, which is categorize, step 0. This is a quick one. We'll go through this pretty fast so we can spend more time in the important areas of RMF. All the information types that are defined in NIST 800-60, the special publication, are found here in CAM. We click edit, identify the information types that are present in the boundary, select them, and that will pull in the information types along with their corresponding confidentiality, integrity, and availability levels, of which we are going to take the high watermark. In this case, it's moderate based on the information type selected. And that is what we will use to apply the recommended impact level for the package. If your internal policy permits deviating from that recommended impact level, you can. And a justification statement window will appear here that you'll need to fill out to so the AO knows what they are reviewing when you push this package over for approval. To do that, that's a very easy process. We click request approval. Whoever is defined as the AO or the AODR, they will get the notification that they need to review the package. And this is where you have some configuration options. Whenever you click request approval at the 3 different steps during the process that we need to request approval, at that point, the package will shift over into a read-only state. But there are options on whether or not you want to generate the controls here. So out of the box, we will not generate the controls at this point. However, you can generate them based on configuration changes. We understand that the biggest holdup in a lot of organizations is waiting for the approval. So to alleviate that problem becoming even bigger, we give you the option to create the controls so you can start to do your tailoring and start to do your implementation while you wait for the approval. Depending on what your internal policy is, you can configure CAM to do either of those options, either completely lock down the package to preserve the integrity for the AO, or just lock down the attributes that are editable and then continue to work the controls. So you have flexibility in terms of how you want to implement the RMF process with CAM. Once we have the categorization set, we have the approval, it has not been kicked back for rework, then we're going to be able to move over to the next step of the process, which is select. And this is where we are going to apply overlays as well as do traditional control tailoring. Traditional control tailoring happens from the baseline controls related list at the bottom of the screen. And from here, this is where we can mark our controls as not applicable, inherit controls, fully inherit from a common control provider, partially inherit from a common control provider to create a hybrid, and even mark a control as common for other packages to inherit from. When it comes to NA, we can do that in bulk because there's nothing to tie the control back to. We just mark as not applicable, and it will push those controls over into the appropriate list. We can also do a subset. You can do the select all, but you can also click the checkboxes to do discriminate. So you can select which controls you want to mark as NA. But when it comes to fully inherited or hybrid controls, we're going to want to, we have to do those one at a time because we need to link those back to the common control that they will be inheriting from. So we'll create a hybrid control here. We'll send AC17 over to a hybrid control. To do that, we will click the checkbox to identify that's the control that we want to create a hybrid for. Click the button, and then the window will open up that gives us an option to decide which control requirements are being provided for by that common control provider and which control requirements need to be implemented by the system we're currently working. In this case, we'll just pick AC17A as the common control of the requirements here. And once that designation has been made, then we can see the control has shifted over here to the hybrid control related list. And if we hit the down arrow, we can see AC17A is the control requirement being provided for by that common control provider package. As we can go through and continue to tailor all of our controls out, we will see the results of that here. So any controls that we fully inherit will show up in this related list, anything that's hybrid, anything that's not applicable. And if we have any common controls, we'll have another tab for that one as well. The privacy overlays, and technically CAM is an accelerator for IRM because it leverages existing IRM capabilities just skinned for the RMF use case. And I'm going to show an example of that right here with the privacy overlay. So when we apply, if we want to pull in additional controls into a package, we will just leverage a policy object from policy and compliance, and then we will scope out these control objective templates to the privacy overlay. And I say control objective templates because these are the templates that will generate a control when we scope this template out to an entity like the authorization boundary. So we have the PT control family here listed up as all the different control objective templates assigned back to this policy overlay. So when we apply the overlay to the package, we'll generate a control from each one of these control objectives in the list within the package itself. So it's important to note here that there's no limitation on the policy overlays that you can create. You have complete control over that here in CAM. Unlike other RMF solutions that give you set overlays and they're static and you either apply them or you don't. In CAM, you have complete control over this. So if you need to do a high value asset, a cloud system, major application, email system, whatever type of overlay you would like to apply, you create the privacy overlay policy record here, scope out the control objectives that you can either create manually or pull in from a third-party content provider, apply this overlay to the package, and then you'll get those controls generated in. Click back a couple times to get back into the screen here. So now once we've completed all of our tailoring, we've applied the overlays that we need to apply, and we have done our baseline control tailoring from the baseline control list here, then we'll be ready to request approval once again and push the package over into the implement step. Implements where we're going to document the controls, and this is where we're going to see a lot of the strength and capability of ServiceNow really show its head here when it comes to collaborating between the ISSO and the system owner. Because typically when you're working a package, documenting controls, that can take a lot of time, not just on the initial package creation when you're doing the package for the first time, but then again, whether you're doing ongoing authorization or you're doing a full authorization every 3 years, getting out there and contacting the system owners that can be challenging. There's a lot of moving parts, emails, tracking spreadsheets, meetings, calendar invites, tracking things in Outlook. There's a lot of manual parts to that because assessors and auditors, they have freshness dates on implementation statements and artifacts and things like that. So we need to go out and we need to update these controls. Where in the past, that's a manual process that has been automated here in ServiceNow. We have across the top of the screen, we have the chevrons that indicate where we are in the controls lifecycle. A test is the important step here because that's when an attestation will be sent out to the control owner to respond back to. And the attestation itself, it has some smarts, it has some automation behind it. So let me open one up here and we can show that. So here's our GRC attestation that's been sent out for this control. As opposed to doing this through spreadsheets and email, the system does this for you. It sends out the attestation to the control owner or the control owning group to respond back to. You can set the frequency for how often that happens, usually annually for controls and RMF, but if you'd like to do that more frequently, you can. And the way the attestation works is the control implemented, yes, no, not applicable. If yes, upload an evidence attachment to show that that control is being fulfilled, and provide the implementation statement. If no, explain another statement as to why the control is not compliant, and if not applicable, why do you feel that the control should be non-compliant? If you answer yes, the control is compliant, then you go about your business, continue to implement more controls. No action is taken after that. The system sees that as a self-reported compliance to that attestation. However, if the attestation is answered no, the system will see that as self-reported non-compliance. And then there's automation behind that. One, which is dynamically making the control non-compliant with no user intervention. And two would be opening up a POAM or an issue with no user intervention also to help the control owner get that control back into a compliant state. So if that, and there's also a breakdown here. We have a granular breakdown of the control requirements as well. We can attest to these at the granular level, or we can send an attestation out at the main high control level. It's configurable both ways. If you want to get granular, you can. If you want to get more basic and high level, you can do that as well. So again, the importance of that attestation is it can be sent out. Here's the frequency tab here. This one's been sent to annually. When that attestation gets sent out to the control owner, they can take that assessment or that survey. Any yes answers, they mark that the control compliant. Anything that's no answers, system sees that as non-compliant, marks the control non-compliant, opens up a POAM. Now, if this looks kind of clicky, it is. This is the most detailed, granular version of documenting out of control. This isn't always necessary. In some organizations, all organizations, you're going to have some controls that always fail and some controls that always pass. The last agency I was at, very small civilian agency, like 350 employees, didn't have much money. They'd never have the resources for an alternate site for disaster recovery. That's a control that's going to fail in every single package across the entire agency. Those kind of controls, you can group those together. You can attest to them in bulk, do some bulk processing to cut down the manual work. And then the controls that you know that will always pass, you can bulk attest to them and then use the process that we just saw to work the delta in the middle to document out those controls that need the additional information. Once we have documented all the controls in the package, then we'll be able to move over to the next step in the process, which is assess. And now we are going to switch over and actually see this from the perspective of a security control assessor. So we're going to log in now with Stephen Cruz Alba, who is our assessor. And then we're going to open up this package and see how we can perform the assessment. Let's get back into our assessment here. And when we get to step 4 in the process, the system will dynamically create an assessment engagement. Earlier, we saw how policy and compliance was leveraged to do an overlay, and now we're leveraging the assessment engagement from the audit management solution. If you're familiar with ServiceNow audit management, this is what an assessment engagement looks like. There's only some slight differences here for the RMF use case. Across the top of the screen, we see the workflow steps that we're in. Right now, we're in validate and plan. The first step here, scope. The system does that dynamically. When we get to step 4, it will create the assessment engagement and scope it out to the entity, which is the authorization boundary. And by doing that, it will pull in all the controls associated with that boundary, along with all the test plans from 853A, and it will generate the control tests that need to be performed. Middle of the screen here, we'll just run through these tabs. We're doing pretty good on time. The schedule, that's the planned and actual start and end dates for the overall engagement, as well as the field work. The results, when we've completed our assessment, then we'll be able to grade the assessment and provide that opinion statement here. We're going to see how we can generate a SAR when we look at the ATO artifacts. But here's the activity tab. I like to call this out during audit because this is a place where the different assessors can collaborate in a single location outside of Teams or Skype or Outlook or any other place. This is a single collaboration location here, and you can track the expenses and resources if necessary. As far as testing controls, let's get down to one here that's in progress. We'll pick on EC2 again. And the out-of-the-box offering for audit, we have operational test and design test. We deviate from that methodology here in CAM because we're not testing the design of the controls. They come from the government. They come from National Institute of Standard and Technology. We're not assessing the design that they provided us with, just the operational effectiveness of how the control is implemented. The assessment procedures in 853A are all listed here. So examine, interview, and test all those different activities as they're performed. They can be documented here in the activities related list. The evidence request, selfishly, this is my favorite thing in all of IRM because it eliminates a challenge that on paper, it should be easy. It just finds a way to be difficult, which is when it comes time for the assessment, the auditor, the assessor, they always hand out the document request list spreadsheet or the provided by customer spreadsheet. And inevitably, everyone has a different version. That we all have different color codes for what means what in the rows, and then who's going to provide what and who's going to research what. It's just something that finds a way to be hard. We've eliminated all that in ServiceNow with the evidence requests. So as we're testing the control here, we're looking at AC2. As the assessor needs some additional documentation to test the control, they can create a new evidence request or add to an existing one. Link this back to an audit. This is for an internal audit. Short description. We need files to test. And then we can give this person until Friday to respond, assign this to a user or a group. This is what I need to test your control. The whoever this is assigned out to will get the notification in platform, email, text message. Again, however you do notifications, they'll be able to access the request, upload the evidence, and the assessor will be able to access that record and continue to test the control. Well, during testing of the control, the assessment procedures list here, this is a granular breakdown of all the different determine if statements and the different requirements to implement the control. In ServiceNow, you're innocent until proven guilty. The control test is marked effective unless any of these different control test requirements are marked as ineffective. If we mark any of these as ineffective, when we roll back up to the top of the screen, we'll see that the control test has been marked ineffective overall. This provides a granular breakdown of which one of those determinative statements are not compliant. Last thing we'll see here for the for control testing is the observation. And this is where we're able to document what was seen during the control testing and even do the initial draft out of the corrective action plan. In ServiceNow, the corrective action plan and the POAM record, they're part of the same record. They're not separate. And this is where that initial corrective action plan will be drafted out and pulled over there into the control test. I'm sorry, into the control test issue. So let's get back into the main control test here, and we'll take a look at some POAMs. As we go through and perform that control testing, no organization is perfect. Everybody has POAMs. This is what that looks like here, and we'll jump to one that's in the response step. So here's the workflow across the top of the screen. The important step here is respond, because that's going to determine which different types of tasks are generated to help close this POAM out. We have the recommendation. If a corrective action plan was drafted out, it will be pulled into this record. We can see the issue source right here. And it's also important to note that we do not want to send you to work for the Department of Redundancy Department. We don't want to have POAM explosion and have you continue to work the same POAM multiple times. If depending on the POAM source, it will update existing POAM records. So if you have a control test failure, or if you have an attestation failure in place, and then you have a control test failure on top of that, the system will not open up an additional POAM. It will append additional information to that existing POAM to stop from that POAM explosion. In this case, we've analyzed the POAM, and now we need to make a response step here. In this case, we'll just go ahead and click accept, that we're going to accept this one out. And when that happens, the system will dynamically generate acceptance tasks, and you'll also be able to create these ad hoc to make sure that they get closed out. We still have the concept of milestones. So if implementing new software like ServiceNow is what you need to do to close out a POAM, you can still have your procurement milestone, your contract award, kickoff meeting, half point meeting, wrap up meeting at the end of implementation. You can still have those kind of milestones, but the acceptance tasks are what will be assigned out to folks that will help us drive this POAM through to closure. As we finish testing all of our controls and generate our SAR at the end of the assessment, then we'll be able to move on to the next step of the process, which is authorize. And this is where we will request that final ATO approval. To do that, we're going to want to generate some reports. And in this case, we already have one generated to save the time, but we do provide the document template capability here to build out any type of ATO artifact necessary for the ATO package. In this case, we have the SSP that we do provide out of the box, and the way this template works is we point the template to a table. In this case, the SSP is pointed to the authorization package table. Once we've made that selection, the variables box on the right-hand side of the screen shows up. And this is how we populate data out into the report. Here's an example of a variable here, authorization boundary name. To pull these variables in, we just click the button, and that will that'll put that data point in the report where you want it to be, and then it will dynamically populate that based on the data that's in the table. So this is how we build out the SSP right here. If you want to build out the POAM report, you point this to the issue table, the SAR at the assessment engagement table, at the SAP at the assessment engagement table, the risk assessment report at the risk table, so on and so forth. The same process can be used for any ATO artifact. The template builder has been enhanced in recent releases. We have the header and footer that you can add in, the different page number, table of contents, And it's not, we're not competing with Word, but we definitely have the capabilities here to put together a strong ATO artifact. Let's see some examples here also in the report here at some of the variables and how they pull in the data. So here's authorization boundary name. Here's the acronym. Is it a privacy sensitive system? So the work we did back in the prepare step here, the results of our FIPS 199 from the categorization we did at step 0. So when we go back into the package here and we open up the SSP that was generated in PDF, here we can see the program hasty labor. That's the name of the authorization package. We scroll down, see the name of the package, see the acronym. Yes, it's a privacy sensitive system. Here are the impact levels or the different information types that we selected. And again, this is a template, so you can take what we provide out of the box, completely blow it away, add in your own SSP template or your own ATO artifact template, modify what we have, whatever works best for you. So back over into the ATO package here, we're going to click that one button to generate the reports. Based on all the templates that have been assigned to the package, it will generate the different artifacts. Here we have the ATO letter that has been, or the SSP that has been generated. And then the authorization tab in the middle of the screen, this is where we'll be able to upload those artifacts and see the information on the authorization that was provided. So once we get that ATO, that's going to take us to the monitor step in the process. And this is another area where CAM really shows the power of the platform, so to speak, with ServiceNow. And the approach that CAM takes, what makes it different from those other RMF solutions that have been on the market for a while, the different GOTS and COTS products that I used over my 11 years, is the platform approach taken by ServiceNow. The other RMF tools, they're static solutions, point solutions that don't really integrate well with other tools. Even if they do, you still need third-party tools and utilities to help make those integrations more effective. But in ServiceNow, CAM's installed on the ServiceNow platform, full access to all the data in the ServiceNow CMDB, and the more data you have in there, the better. The risk summary tab here, this contains a lot of good information that could have an impact on the ATO of the package, including number of change requests, IT incidents, security incidents, vulnerable items. And because we have an accurate authorization boundary, and we're going to rewind now all the way back to the beginning of our conversation when I said this authorization boundary is the foundation for continuous monitoring. We update this every 24 hours to make sure you have an accurate boundary. This is the reason for that. When we're going to show the change requests, these are filtered down based on the hardware list, based on what's in the boundary. So we're only showing the change requests for what's relevant, IT incidents for what's relevant. We have the hard count here for the number of those records that exist, as well as the average risk score for those records that are open as well. In addition to those hard counts, we have the actual records down at the bottom of the screen in the related list. So as long as everybody has the appropriate permissions, then they can see these different records and take action where needed. This is also a place where you can build out automation on top of this. So with change requests, for example, if we have a major application package and we have an ATO on version 12, if somebody submits a change request to go to version 14, no more ATO, right? The ATO is on version 12, not 14. That's going to be a problem. That might slip through the cracks, but that's something an assessor will never miss. With Flow Designer, you can build out workflows to notify system owners and ISSOs when certain conditions like a change request that could impact the ATO or exist. The flows work on triggers and actions. Triggers can be when a record is created or updated based on a time trigger, something like that. And then the actions are the if-then statement. If this happens, then do this. If this happens, then do this. So there's a lot of automation that can be built into this to assist with your top-down look into your risk posture of the package. So this is one way that we're going to be able to monitor the package for risk. The other way we're going to do this is with continuous monitoring indicators. I have two that are open here now. We have a basic indicator, which looks at data in the ServiceNow CMDB, as well as a few manual indicators that just kick off workflows and generate records to substantiate that work is being done. In this case, we have a indicator that's monitoring RA5, the vulnerability scanning control. And this has been pointed back to our web server boundary. And because this is a basic indicator, it's going to look at data that's in the ServiceNow CMDB. This one, this is our 1902 indicator. So it's going to look for critical vulnerable items older than 15 days. The supporting data tab here, this is where we identify the table where the data resides that we want to monitor. So we're talking vulnerabilities, so the vulnerable item table. The indicator is going to look through these supporting data fields in that table. And the basic criteria that the indicator is going to look for is if it finds a vulnerability that's in some state of being open, it's older than 15 days, and has a risk rating of critical. This one, we're going to run this on a daily basis. You probably have you're probably scanning every 72 hours for CDM anyways. And then we can see the results that the indicator ran in this in this tab here. So the most recent time and the time prior to that. And then anytime the indicator runs, you'll have a historical record down here at the bottom of the list. And again, ServiceNow is a big relational database. It's just records in a table in the database. So if you want to create reports like trending information on indicator results, you can show the open and closed indicators. I'm sorry, the passed and failed indicators based on a period of time. So to see the impact this failed indicator had on the control, we have to go to the control itself and open this one up. And this control, even though it's in a draft state, when it opens up in a second, we'll see the status is non-compliant here. And the reason for that, back to the connective tissue, just back to the part of the platform that we just came from, that indicator, critical vulnerable items older than 15 days, 1902. Far right column shows last result passed as false, meaning that the indicator failed. So here's a workflow in ServiceNow. The trigger was the failed indicator, and the action was to make the control non-compliant dynamically with no user intervention, and dynamically open up a POAM and assign that back to Susan, who's our control owner. So that's how we do automated continuous monitoring based on information that's in the CMDB. But we can also do manual indicators anytime somebody actually has to touch the keyboard or put their eyes on the screen. AU6, for example, here we have 3 requirements. The first one is to review your system logs at a defined period of time and look for suspicious activity. The second is to report findings to certain roles and personnel. And the third is to update the policy or update the monitoring based on policy changes. So we have 2 indicator templates assigned back to this one, AU6A and AU6C. So the first one, this is a manual indicator, and this is going to send out it's going to generate a record and kick off a workflow anytime somebody actually has to touch this keyboard. So manual indicator, the description field up here shows that we have a bracket, the organizationally defined parameter. RMF this is nice, right? They tell us that we have to do something, but not that often. They give us the flexibility as to how we're going to implement this control. So for this one, we're going to review it every quarter, and we're going to look for inappropriate or unusual activity. The schedule, we're going to run this on a quarterly basis, and we'll be able to see every time that this indicator has ran at the bottom of the screen, and all of the indicators that have been generated from this template that are monitoring controls in different packages. And we can see their statuses, which ones have failed, and additional information. When these indicators trigger and they get sent out, now we're going to switch over and we're going to see this from a perspective of Susan Orwell. Susan is the control owner, and she has an indicator task that was sent back to here for AU6A, and she needs to upload. She needs to perform her upload her comments, give her result here. Yes, it was passed. Put in additional comments. Attach an attachment here with a paperclip at the top of the screen to show that that's happening. And this is beneficial because no assessor is going to take your word for it that you're doing this work. You have to show them and substantiate that this work is happening. The manual indicators are a great way to substantiate and show that that work is happening. So indicators, we just saw 2 of them. You have a basic indicator that looks at data in the ServiceNow CMDB, manual indicator that kicks off workflows and generates records. And you can have an indicator for any control in the RMF library. Usually the controls that have a verb in the title, anything that says review, something like that, you can definitely create indicators for that. You can monitor policies for compliance to make sure whether or not they're in date or if they've been updated on time and reviewed. So there's no limit. You can have, we look at a RA5 again. You can have an indicator for lows that are older than 365 days, one for moderates older than 6 months, one for highs older than 30 days, and one for criticals older than 15. So very, very flexible. When we say digital continuous monitoring, that's what we mean. Last thing I'll show here is the CAM overview dashboard. We provide 5 tabs out of the box to track the RMF process. Authorization boundary, packages, baseline controls, POAM, and assessment activities here. these reports that we do provide, the ones out of the box, you can modify them, blow them away if they're not providing data you like. If you can create new reports if you would like. If you can work Excel or PowerPoint, then you have all the technical capabilities you need to build out reports in ServiceNow. So that's a pretty good rundown. We've gone through a lot. And before I kick it back over to Teresa, we'll just do a quick recap. We started out with an authorization boundary, showed how those boundaries can be created and maintained with filters. Then we jumped into an authorization package and took that package all the way through the RMF process, 0 through 6, stopped and did an assessment at step 4, showed how we can generate the ATO artifacts, attach them to the package, and then do some continuous monitoring at the end and monitor with reports. So I have no voice. I'm going to send it back here to Teresa and see if there is any questions or comments at this time.
Yeah, actually, Brian was kind enough to answer a really good question that I think would be good for you to answer live also, because I'm sure a lot of other people have this question.
Okay.
If a boundary element is also an entity, does NIST 800 impact overall compliance of the entity?
No, the NIST CAM is working at the system level, and it's not going to have an impact on that individual system element. Those system elements are pulled in through filters, and they're related to the authorization boundary, but they're not necessarily connected, so to speak. So there won't be an impact to that individual system element out of the box.
Perfect.
But there is a relationship, right? There, it's a entity, and then we group those entities, the CIs or entities, we group those into a boundary entity, and that's really what CAM is looking at.
Yeah, and we can get a little off the rails with semantics here with entities and such. We can pull in, they can be entities that they pull into the boundary, but in CAM's eyes, they're system elements that are part of the boundary. They're not it's not necessarily that true IRM entity scoping, but they are entities that are included in the boundary.
Fabulous. Well, thank you both very, very much. That was an amazing presentation, an incredible demo. I put in the chat the link to the playlist that you'll be able to view on demand after the fact. But please, visit us at the CAM website, join us for more community webinars or just for conversation on the community. We really do appreciate and enjoy, getting to know our customers and the sharing between customers, which is really important. The playlist is currently in the chat. And of course, there's also a registration link to see more webinars, which we hope you join us for. Thank you very, very much. Again, thank you, Brian. Thank you, Todd. Thank you, everybody else on the phone or on our Zoom call. And for those who are going to be joining us later, we're glad that you've been joining us then. Thank you all.
Great. Thanks, Teresa. And if you're working with a federal customer, please don't hesitate to reach out to Todd or myself.
Wonderful.
Yep. Thanks, folks.
Pick that up, it's the beginning of the new. Back from the rehab with the new point of view. Been on top, been